Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Brennan with the Notre Dame Alumni Association. Thanks so much for joining us for another edition of On Point at Notre Dame. Last year, the university announced plans for the formation of the Donald R. Keough School of Global Affairs. When the school opens in the fall of 2017, it will be the first new school or college created at the university in almost a century. Today, we'll be learning all about the plans for the new school, and we're lucky to have with us Dean Scott Appleby, the Maryland Keough Dean of the School of Global Affairs. Scott, thanks so much for joining us today.
I'm delighted to be here, Kevin. Thank you.
For those of you joining us live, here's just a quick rundown on how today's program is going to work. First, Scott is going to kind of walk us through the plans for the new school and the reasons behind it. And afterwards, in the second half of today's events, we're going to be taking your questions. You can start submitting questions now using the question form right underneath the streaming player where you're watching the video live. You can submit questions now and throughout the event, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can as time allows. So with that, Scott, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Kevin. People ask me all the time, why is Notre Dame opening the first new school in almost a century? So, in honor of David Letterman's last week on the air, I have the top 5 list with me for top 5 reasons that Notre Dame is opening a Keough school. Reason number 5, or number 1, I don't know how he does this. The world needs us. What does that mean? The world needs us. Let me open with a little anecdote. The day I became dean last July, the Leadership Council of Notre Dame was in Chicago, and the president of Northwestern University, Morton Shapiro, was giving a talk, and he made a kind of offhand remark before he got started with his formal remarks, and he said this. Morton Shapiro is a development economist. He's worked in development studies around the world. While he's been president of Northwestern, he hasn't been that engaged. But in the 90s, he told us, he worked with the World Bank and worked in Nigeria, just as Nigeria was discovering oil, the vast reserves of oil. And they were trying to figure out how to guide Nigeria in this development. He paused and said, everything we told them was wrong. Everything we told them was wrong. Kind of a stunning comment. He went on to explain that the development specialist had great technical expertise. They knew how to get the oil out of the ground, how to market it, how to distribute it, but they paid no attention to the society and its particular history in which they were working. So they were ignorant of the religion, the ethnic groups, the politics of Nigeria. And as you know, Nigeria today is not exactly the poster child for authentic human development and economic growth and stability and so on, quite the opposite. I ran up to Morton Shapiro after his talk and said, I wish you talked about that theme the entire time, because that is why Notre Dame, one of the reasons Notre Dame is establishing this school. Why does the world need Notre Dame? Shapiro told me that we've made some progress in the last 15 years on this question, but we're still, as he put it, on the 10-yard line looking 90 yards down the field. What progress do we need to make? We have remarkable colleagues and peers across this country and in Europe in particular that are working on developing impoverished societies, trying to foster democracy, economic growth, freedom, civil rights, and so on. And the approach is sometimes quite narrowly secular and technical. Economic development is absolutely essential, and we must have material development. There's no question about it. But that kind of development of societies, that working, partnering with societies, just doesn't work. It backfires at times if we're not in real partnership with people in Nigeria, in parts of Asia, in other parts of Africa, in Latin America, in our own country. The dialogue has to be a dialogue of respect for the human dignity of the people with whom we work, for the religions, the cultures, the history. Notre Dame can bring to the conversation the question of meaning, values, purpose, and also that kind of deep humanities, liberal arts strength that we've had for many, many years, what we're known for. That is precisely what the conversation needs. A partner who will master the technical, the economic, the material dimensions, but will also bring the question of meaning, purposes, and values. And when we go around the country talking to folks at Harvard and Tufts, USAID, Stanford, they welcome Notre Dame into the question and say Notre Dame should own ethics, should own religion, should own the cultural dimension. So we're very pleased by that. The problems that the world faces today are integrated problems. That is to say, when we worry about a conflict or health care or economic development, we see in so many areas these things are all interconnected. For example, if there's a natural disaster, and we know that with climate change, we have to be prepared for changes in climate, changes in and disasters that are striking. This is not just about environmental science, it's also about healthcare, governance, conflict that will come over resources. How do we bring a holistic view that's multidisciplinary and that asks the questions about consequences for the human beings involved to bear on the discussion about development? So the problems are integrated, and every one of our peers, other universities and think tanks and developmental organizations are trying, so far with not great success, to bring to bear the engineers, the scientists, the ethicists, the historians, the political scientists together in an integrated approach. Because we're starting fresh, in a way, ironically, we have a head start. Secondly, these are all human problems, and sometimes, oddly it seems, we fail to recognize that they are problems that face and confront and affect human beings who are complicated, emotional, psychological, spiritual, cultural, economic creatures of God, and we don't often appreciate that. We don't even ask the question, although we've started that conversation already in the Keough School, in conferences in Rome and elsewhere. What does it mean to engage in human development that respects human dignity? That kind of conversation, again, surprisingly, is not going on, and Notre Dame will do so at a very high level of sophistication. So, reason number one, we're bringing the lens of integral human development to the conversation. That's a term out of Catholic social teaching, first articulated by Pope Paul VI in 1967. Pope Francis refers to it, even uses that phrase. It simply means looking at development in two important ways. When we want to develop societies that are poor and suffering, who are hungry, who don't have access to education, and so on, we want to do so with all hands on deck. And secondly, we want to address the full human person who's at the center of development. And that requires the cultural, the religious, the spiritual, and so on. So our phrase is integral human development, and we want to bring various disciplines and perspectives to bear. So that's reason number one. The world needs us. Reason number two is we need the world. Notre Dame needs the world. What do I mean by that? Well, as you know, those of you who are alums and friends and parents of Notre Dame students, Notre Dame has done great work over the years in sending students to study abroad. I was fortunate as an undergrad at Notre Dame to go to Innsbruck. It changed my life. Many of us who've been at Notre Dame have profited from great instruction and study abroad. That said, we are not yet a global university. We're not yet a truly international university. We are beginning to move in that direction through our global gateways, where we have sites globally, internationally, in London, Rome, Jerusalem, Beijing, elsewhere around the world, where our scholars, our students, our faculty, our staff will actually be on site researching and interacting in centers of the world, and also rural outposts that will work from these centers. So we want our students, our graduates, our faculty to be engaged on a regular basis with research and teaching and learning around the world. That's very important. I'll give you one little anecdote. One of our supporters and potential advisors in a more formal sense wrote me recently and said, you know, I love the Observer. I read the student newspaper online. It does not cover the globe. And this gentleman has written me 3 times. I'm going to have to go sit with the Observer editors. It's a little it's a little thing, but actually, when you start looking, you realize that the Observer covers everything but everything outside of the Dome and the United States. That is a little microcosm of the fact that Notre Dame, for all that we've accomplished, still tends to think in an insular way, kind of as we call it here, in the bubble. Well, the Keough School is one of the units, not the only one, that's going to break that bubble and bring the world to Notre Dame and Notre Dame to the world. Other deans, other schools at Notre Dame are working on this as well, but the Keough School should and will be a leader in this effort. The third reason for establishing a new School of Global Affairs is impact, impact, impact. Let's see. There it is. I'm sure you're following along carefully with my props here. Impact. One new thing that the Keough School will bring to Notre Dame that's absolutely essential for us to have a voice in the world in these important areas of peace building, human rights, governance, development, the areas that the Keough School will address itself to in its teaching and research and outreach, is policy and practice. We do not have a history at Notre Dame of policy studies. We have some gifted individuals scattered around the faculty, not very many of them, frankly. Of course, science and engineering are translational disciplines. That is, they have a direct impact on the world by their graduates' work in science and engineering. But across the board, we have not developed a strong connection between our terrific research in so many departments across the colleges on the one hand, and the application of that research directly in formulating policies that will help lift people out of poverty, provide education, support women and children in particular, prepare for conflicts, and help with good governance. We have to come up to speed in policy. And so some of the new appointments that will be made through the Keough School, we want to bring diplomats and public officials and an array of experts to campus, and we will hire policy experts who will teach our students and help us think about ways in which our research across the board can be translated into policy and also into practices on the ground. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things people are anticipating Notre Dame will contribute is a conversation in practice, that is, to improve practice on the ground about ethics. Ethics here is a term that needs to be unpacked. We might also talk about practical wisdom or looking ahead to the unforeseen consequences of decisions that are made every day in politics, in governance, in development, in peace building. We don't often, I'm learning, in these organizations, international, from the United Nations to a variety of other organizations that are working in development and peace, there is not someone or some ones around the table who say, what are the ethical implications? Let's unpack them of the decision we're about to take. If we put a medical clinic near this ethnic group rather than that one, what is that going to do to the larger society? Does that foment conflict or does it help to solve conflict? So we're talking about ethics in the sense of the practical impact, first of all, of decisions that are made, but also in a deeper sense of ethics as moral discourse. And when we ask, this is a world that has to make choices about resources and who gets them, who deserves them, what priorities for health care, and the world is not yet prepared to have that discussion. Notre Dame has to be part of that discussion. So impact, impact, impact is the third reason. Notre Dame should and wants to have greater impact in policy and practice circles. Number 4 of the top 5 reasons for establishing a new School of Global Affairs is it's who we are and what we do. It's who we are and what we do. What does that mean? We have an identity in the world already. We have a great identity with football. You can go all over the world, and as I have, and the Archbishop of Zamboanga City once asked me, why can't Lou Holtz beat Boston College? As Archbishop, I really didn't come here to talk about that, and I don't have the answer myself. I came to talk about the conflict in Mindanao. So Notre Dame is known around the world for football, but it's also increasingly known for its research, for its scholarship. That's also what we want Notre Dame to be known for. And of course, it's known as a great Catholic university by anyone who's heard of it, and many people have. So we have a profile of a place that is compassionate, ethical. It has a religious mission, whatever that might mean to people, but they recognize that it is that kind of place. And we have a rich history of sending students into service while they're on campus and beyond, and of committing ourselves to repairing the world, as it were. So it's who we are. And we are now in a globalized world that's, there really can no longer be a competitive top 10, top 20 university in this country or the world if we're not fully globalized, if we don't bring the impact of Notre Dame to the world beyond and get involved in a very sophisticated way with all the initiatives that are relevant to our mission to serve the common good, to put service and spirituality and scholarship to service to the world, to common good. And so it's who we are and what we do. In another way, it's who we are. We are part of, as Notre Dame, the world's oldest and one could say wisest global institution in the world, in history, the Roman Catholic Church. It is the transnational global institution, and we have only begun at Notre Dame. We've made a beginning, but we have not yet deepened the alliances with the institutional church, which in terms of healthcare, education, development, reduction of poverty, the issues we are going to be engaged in the Keough School, the Catholic Church is already a major world player. We want to support the church in those efforts, learn from the church. One of our partners, of course, is Catholic Relief Services, which also has the motto of integral human development. We're also working with the Pontifical Council on Justice and Peace, the Secretary of State, and other units in the Vatican. And we want to deepen and increase these ties and the ties to local religious congregations around the world where we will send students and practice development broadly understood in the ways I've described. So, number 4, it's who we are and what we do. Last but not least, of the 5 reasons I'm going to give you today for a new school, and then be open to your comments and questions, is legacy. Legacy is number 5 or number 1, depending on how you're supposed to do these top 5 lists. So, legacy. We have inherited, and this a terrific legacy, and the vision and commitment of many outstanding human beings. And of course, we just have had a wonderful commencement that honored in many ways Father Hesburgh, Father Ted. He's one of our patron saints, if you will, for the Keough School. The Keough School includes the Kroc Institute for International Peace Studies, which Father Ted established with Mrs. Joan Kroc, another one of our patronesses who has gone to her reward and established that Peace Institute. He established the Keough Institute for International Studies, which focuses on democracy and development in Latin America and Africa. He established the Center for Civil and Human Rights, which is also an integral part of the Keough School. Those 3 institutes were part of his vision for recognizing 30 years ago, as he did in such visionary ways, that human rights, civil rights, development, peace building, democratization are all intertwined. And he established those as pillars of Notre Dame's international footprint, as it were. We also have in the Keough School a new initiative for global development that works with the U.S. government and with the private sector to advance development projects. And we have 3 outstanding regional studies institutes, the Keough Naughton Institute for Irish Studies, the Nanovic Institute for European Studies, and the very new Liu Institute for Asia and Asian Studies. So we have, in all of those cases, families like the Liu family who have sponsored that Asian Institute, the late Mrs. Kroc, Helen Kellogg, a variety of donors, and if I start, I shouldn't even list them because there's so many families who have contributed to Notre Dame's international legacy, service of the common good, and of course, the central player in the Keough School is the family of Donald R. Keough. This is the Donald R. Keough School of Global Affairs, and Mr. Keough passed away within a couple of days of Father Ted. They were friends on earth, and I'm sure enjoying that friendship now in heaven. And Mr. Keough had a remarkable vision that was motivated by his own work in the private sector as one of the leaders in the corporate world in Coca-Cola, in which he wanted and often said to me and to others, the great wealth of corporations, of the private sector, in collaboration with government and nonprofit organizations, should be brought to bear in lifting all boats, in addressing the structural problems that disadvantaged and marginalized people face. He was a great advocate for social justice. So he's part of that legacy we've inherited with great pride, and his family. So we are not starting anything new in that sense. We have so many wonderful people, giants, who've gone before us, many of whom are still on this earth, alive and supporting and sponsoring and working with us. And that's another important reason to take this next step in the growth of Notre Dame to real global and international status. So this is a way of saying shake down the thunder, because it's there and it's rumbling on this front, and we're calling it down to create a new global school. My email address is appleby.3@nd.edu. That's appleby.3@nd.edu. If you want to know the other top 5 reasons for establishing a school, I don't have the time to give you the top 10 list as Letterman would, and he did his top 10 list in 1/100th of the time I've just taken to explain my 5. So I don't think I'll be getting any calls to host a talk show. So those are my opening remarks. I'm really looking forward to questions and comments that Kevin and others might have about this.
Thanks so much, Scott. Remember, for those of you watching live, we're going to take your questions now. You can submit them in the question form underneath the live streaming player where you're watching the video. You can send in as many questions as you like to that form, and we're going to get to as many of them as we can here in the time remaining. Scott, you know, this obviously was announced last year, the plans for the school. How long has this kind of been in the works here at the university, and why was this the right time to move forward and build this new school for global affairs? Great question, Kevin.
I think the first conversations that Provost Tom Burrish initiated began in 2010. Dan Myers, our terrific associate provost, who's leaving to become the provost of Marquette, chaired a committee that did a preliminary survey of the field. What are other universities doing? How are they approaching this question? Because we've known for many years that the leading universities would be addressing these questions of globalization. And so that first committee did a kind of a mapping of the field survey and discussed options that Notre Dame could bring forward, one of which was a new school. Then Nick Interkin, Associate Provost and Vice President for Internationalization, who helps oversees our Global Gateway programs, among other international initiatives, chaired the second committee on campus that I was a member of, that began to hammer out at least an initial framework for curriculum and faculty hiring and so forth for the school. So we've had really over 4 years of conversation before I became dean last July, and this year we've made a lot of progress in establishing an office and a leadership council and bringing our units together and developing a strategic plan. We're working on aspects of a new curricular program at the master's level and eventually the undergrad level. And so we've been hitting the ground running now. We hit the ground running about 5 years ago, and we're making a lot of progress toward this every year in anticipation of opening the school in August of 2017, so a little over 2 years from now. The ground will be broken for the new building soon.
You mentioned the new building, I believe going to be named Jenkins Hall. What can you tell us about what that building is going to be like?
It's going to be terrific. I've had a lot of fun, frankly, and learned a lot. this past year, working with the architects, both our own Doug Marsh, Mike Daly, and others here on campus, but also the architects from Chicago who are working with us, and how to put that building together, how to create space in the building that reflects the global mission of this school. For example, there's a really cool mediation room, we're calling it, that will allow us to be in touch through Skype and video and various means with people around the world as we confer about everything from peace negotiations, which have occurred on campus in the past, and now we'll have an important mediating space, to seminars, to visits of dignitaries. There's also a beautiful forum where we can host important visitors who will give lectures in the school and to Notre Dame. And we will be moving dozens and dozens and dozens of faculty on campus into Jenkins Hall, but also providing space for the 15 or 20 new faculty we seek to hire in the next 5 to 6 years to provide the foundation for the school, in addition to the faculty we already have. And also that building will host all kinds of classrooms and meeting spaces for students, undergraduates and graduates. And it's just a beautiful structure. It'll be really magnificent with its front on Notre Dame Avenue. It'll be the first building you see at Notre Dame.
Okay, and I think we're ready to start taking our first question from the audience here. If we can pull it up on the screen here. The question comes from David. Can you speak briefly about the curriculum, graduate or undergraduate, that will be offered when the school opens?
I see that word briefly, David, so let me see if I can do that. The core of the Keough School's new curricular offerings will be a master's program in global affairs, and it will have 3 or 4 intensive tracks. That is, the graduates will have a master's in global affairs, but a track in peace studies, development studies, governance, we're not sure what we might call it, and maybe a track in resilience. That is, how do we bring all hands on deck to address questions like climate change and the resilience of societies under threat of natural disasters, war, shortages of food and water, etc. So we'll have those tracks where there will be at least 10 courses that each student takes in the tracks, but every student will take 4 to 6 core courses. One will be a seminar on integral human development and the ethics of development, but there will also be some core courses that are really de rigueur. They're required now by all these great global affairs schools, of which there are about 8 to 9 that we think are really the outstanding schools around North America and Europe. And these all require now that every student understands how budgets work, can have at least a basic grasp of statistics, quantitative analysis, that know how to write, how to express themselves, how to communicate, how to integrate information. These are basic skills at a professional leadership level, and so there will be core courses that provide those skills, as well as a kind of value, meaning, purpose, religious, cultural orientation that everyone will take. So they'll come from the program with a kind of common identity. We will also, we think and hope, have joint degree programs on the graduate level. So that Master's in Global Affairs will be paired with the JD degree, a law degree, or with a PhD in economics, or with an MBA that will provide kind of the international global context for those professional degrees and academic degrees. That's exciting. We are just now beginning conversations with Dean John McGree, the College of Arts and Letters, and the chairs, some of the relevant chairs in the college of various departments, to create an undergraduate program of study, and also hopefully maybe a 5-year BA, MA in Global Affairs. That's very exciting, and we're about to start crafting that.
Right. Well, it's quite an undertaking. You've got putting together curriculum at both the undergraduate and graduate level. Mm-hmm. I think we have another question here coming in from the audience. This question's from Norm. What will be the makeup of the school's faculty, current faculty from the other colleges, outside faculty, or both?
Norm, the answer is all of the above. We have faculty on this campus who are already working in various aspects of global and international affairs. Many in the College of Arts and Letters. We have some wonderful political scientists, for example, in international relations, historians, sociologists, of a really terrific Department of Economics that is giving more and more emphasis to the economics of development. How do we think about the applied nature of economics to poor societies, societies struggling to come out of poverty? So we have and are already entering into some partnerships with departments and individual faculty who will be central to our teaching. We couldn't start a school without those folks. We do need to fill gaps. So in addition to drawing on faculty to teach in our programs from the College of Arts and Letters, Science, Engineering, Mendoza, as relevant where that makes sense for them and us, we want to hire, as I mentioned, somewhere between 15 and 20 new faculty. An important number of them will be from the worlds of policy and practice that the more traditional mainstream academic departments are not always going to hire. That will be the Keough School's responsibility. And those scholars and practitioners have a little bit different configuration between writing and being in the field and teaching, and they're absolutely valuable for that applied translational. So we'll want to hire a number of new faculty to fill the gaps in policy and practice, but also to add to our international profile in our existing departments. Because when I mentioned before that Notre Dame is not truly global yet, I think it's fair to say that in most of our departments, we're only now beginning to think about that broader global canvas. I'm a historian, and the history department in the last several years has given attention to globalizing its offerings. But we still have a lot to do to build up strength in Asia, in history and politics and economics, strength in India in particular, but we can go across the globe and see where Notre Dame wants to build by adding scholars who have expertise regionally and linguistically. We hope the Keough School can help with that over time. We can't cover the world right away, but we hope that one of the great accomplishments of the Keough School over time will be to deepen Notre Dame's expertise in regional studies and as well as in the various disciplinary approaches.
Are there challenges that come with hiring these new faculty members for a school that hasn't launched yet and is just being created? And are there also advantages to that?
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, the challenge for both hiring faculty and attracting new students is we don't have a track record yet. We don't have, as we do in other units on the university. And so we've got to make the case that this is an exciting, bold, innovative enterprise, and that you've already got great colleagues here to work with. Come and join us. And the excitement about that for people is, and when we go to other universities, they say, we wish you were you because you get to start fresh. And that means come on the ground floor and help us create and innovate and do something very exciting, because many of our peers and aspirational peers and future competitors established their global and international schools during the Cold War. And their faculty and their orientation is not post 9/11 or even post Cold War, and so they're turning those big battleships around, whereas we can start making our own mistakes fresh right away.
Let's take another question from the audience, and this comes in from Tim. How will this new school collaborate with other on-campus groups like the Nanovic Institute, Keough, and others to support undergraduate research and travel?
Great question. The Nanovic Institute, which is mentioned, is an integral part of the school. So Jim McAdams, who's the director of the Nanovic Institute, is one of our on our leadership council, and we will look to folks like Jim and to the Keough Institute, and that are right in our wheelhouse. That is part of our crew to help us think through undergraduate research and travel. One of the great exciting things, Notre Dame is already, Nanovic, for example, Keough Naughton, other units on campus, I hate to name any because I'll miss so many, are already, as many of you know, promoting undergraduate research abroad. Kellogg Institute does a great deal of this. And what the Keough School hopes to bring is take that to a new level consolidate and organize it, have it be more thematically coherent, have it tied even more so to internships and eventual employment tracks, career employment tracks. We hope to be involved in all that. You know, our undergraduates, as most people listening to this conversation know, our undergraduates are without peer in the leading universities. As you go to Harvard or Brown or Yale or Stanford, and our undergraduates, in terms of their talent, their sophistication, and you know, we think they're better in the sense, or how do I put that? We're very proud of them. Let's just say that, because they also come to Notre Dame not only with an awareness, as many young people do, of global challenges, more so than in my generation, but they come to Notre Dame wanting to do good. They come from Catholic backgrounds or other religious backgrounds or traditions, and they come here in part on fire to figure out how they can give back, how they can transform the world. And so they're ready. We have to provide for them better and better, more coordinated, more thematically rich internships, study abroad, research that will also carry over into their careers, because we not only want to educate them here and expand their global consciousness, we want them to go out and be global leaders. And so it's a great question, and one of the more exciting things we're looking forward to doing in the Keough School.
When you talk about, you know, carrying over to their careers, what types of careers, you know, do you envision, you know, graduates of the Keough School will be going into?
We hope to place students, and here I'm talking primarily about graduate students who will be moving right from their MA into a career. But again, we hope that some undergraduates will go through a program, a 5-year program that will land them a job after they get their master's. When they start as freshmen here and go through 5 years and then go into a job. Anyway, we hope to place those students in 3 areas: the private sector, working with government, and working with non-governmental organizations, so covering the waterfront, as it were. Private sector, I mentioned Don Keough earlier, and he and many others are very interested in corporate social responsibility. This is not a new thing, but there is more awareness that the double bottom line is worth considering. That is, to do good, to help people thrive and prosper is also good business in the long run and even in the short run. And to do good and to help people prosper in so many societies requires more than the company going in and simply opening shop. They have to understand, what is that context? What is that society? What are its values? What are its dynamics? What's its history? What's the religious dynamic, and so on? And we want to be able to place our students as consultants and partners to the private sector. As they become more and more involved, the private sector becomes more and more involved in development and supporting efforts at peace and stability, which is necessary for businesses to thrive and economies to grow. We want our graduates to work with government in a variety of, one agency of the government we're already working with is U.S. Agency for International Development. That's a natural partner for us. Because it's our government's approach to fostering international development in various ways. We want our students to work with the United Nations, with the European Union, bringing their particular kind of expertise on politics, governance, development, peace building, whatever it may be, into that conversation with the ethical dimension I mentioned before. And of course, a natural home for many of our graduates will be working with organizations like Catholic Relief Services, World Vision, Red Cross, Save the Children, Oxfam International. This is a changing world, the development world and the non-governmental organization world, and we got to be on top of how those changes are occurring, the relationship between international and national players. And we want many of our students, by the way, we want to increase the number of international students on campus who will be part of our programs. And so we want to place people in all these sectors in a variety of different jobs.
For those of you watching live, just a reminder, you can submit your questions now using the question box underneath the live streaming player. And I think we're going to go to our next audience question now, and this comes from Dylan. With many established and well-regarded schools of international affairs or even global affairs, are there advantages to being the new kid on the block?
Yes, that's a great question from Dylan. The one of the first things I did right after becoming dean, it just so happened, is I was in Ireland, and one of the supporters and friends of Notre Dame and of the Keough School, Fergal Naughton, brought us to a museum in Dublin where a conference, or an exhibit, I should say, was being held on successful failures, how to fail better. Now that's a great approach because we get to fail in all new ways, and you fail better, meaning you improve, you advance, you create a new landscape through trying and getting better and plotting out your own approach. So a great advantage is we are the new kid on the block, and as I mentioned earlier, while we do have faculty and departments and different international opportunities, we're not yet entrenched in a particular approach, and so we can respond to the particular needs of the market today, the job market, and of the world more broadly. And we have to do that in a way that recognizes that the needs that we face today and the challenges today will be different by the time our first class graduates. And so we're trying to anticipate how to think about how to give our students the knowledge and the skills and the experience that as they move through different careers and different challenges, they're able to apply the insights, the wisdom, the knowledge in different ways. So it's a terrific advantage. We have to make our name for ourselves, and we have to succeed in that, failing better every time as you create something new. But I'm just delighted that, and it's one of the most exciting things about the Keough School. We're making it up as we go.
All right, let's take another question from the audience here. This comes from Don. If you could choose a current global challenge that Notre Dame should add its unique voice and perspective to, what would it be?
Well, that's a great question. I'm not going to answer it the way Don asked it, and that shows that Don asked a good question, because I'm going to give 2 or 3 things. The thing I want to go to first is the situation of women in the world. And of course, we would include women and children. I don't mean to exclude children when I focus on women, but there is so much excitement, focus, energy, attention to the cause of women, and this is across the board. So I'm referring not only to women taking leadership in politics in our country, or breaking through the glass ceiling and income equality. All that's very important. I'm also referring to the great potential in global leadership that we see in women as they are given greater access to education around the world. One of the key issues is how do we get in so many parts of the world women to enter into education. One of the things we do in the Keough School is a project on Islam and Catholicism, bringing the wisdom of those traditions together. And one of the lessons we're learning is how do we work with the world of Islam to provide education for so many Muslim women, for example, to take that example, because there's such potential there that is a multiplying effect. If you bring women more fully into leadership in various ways, if they're better educated, if they get access to education, not discriminated against, you've got a key right there to transforming the world in a humane, compassionate way. Notre Dame needs to think through that. We need to work internally in the Keough School to bring women into leadership, and women and men here in leadership who understand how to make the situation of women in the world today a real priority. I say much more about that. Second thing I'm going to mention, Don, sorry for 2 answers, is I come from the last 14 years directing the Peace Studies Institute at Notre Dame, and I recognized from what I learned from the great colleagues of that institute that when we talk about peace and conflict, this is the beginning of a much larger conversation about healthcare, peace, governance, human rights. These things go together. And now what we have looming, as we thought, well, we're making some progress on peace building. We're in the world. We're a little bit better at peace accords. We have a project at Notre Dame at the Kroc Institute, the Peace Accords Matrix, that analyzes some of the problems of implementing peace accords, why they fail so often, and how to improve them. So we're making progress, but suddenly here comes climate change. And we're not known as one of the leading climate change universities in the world, but we have some real expertise across this university on climate science, and we need to develop an appreciation from the peace and conflict and development angle of how the changes in climate, the natural disasters that are coming, we've already begun to experience, how that's going to add to the challenges of governance, healthcare, conflict, peace building. So we've got to be brave for that. So this is a way of saying, how do we bring the sciences and engineering into the conversation around peace building, human rights, governance, and development? And the way they're all going to intersect with one another, and already are, is we know we're going to be facing new crises around the world. We need only look at Nepal, where, for example, we've had a team at Kroc working in Nepal on the new constitution and the peace accords, and they've been working for over 10 years assiduously on different elements of building up that society more democratically and ending the conflict there. And suddenly the place gets ravaged by these earthquakes. How does that change the dynamics? Our students, our faculty have to be resilient in the sense they have to understand that things are going to change dramatically, and the questions of governance, democracy, freedom, human rights are going to be right there, but we've got to adjust to that.
We have another question coming in from Jane, another one of our viewers. And Jane asks, given Notre Dame's Catholic mission and traditions, how will the Keough School acknowledge and work with countries and people of other religious backgrounds?
That's a great question, Jane. One of the wonderful things about the Catholic tradition is that it's Catholic, that it has obviously a firm set theological identity, ecclesial history. It is the organized world religion, despite how decentralized Catholicism is. When you really look at it, it's not so monolithic as some people think. It's messy in a wonderful way, but nonetheless, we've got the Pope, we've got the bishops, we have a structure, we have universities and networks and hospitals and schools and so forth. And so we have that aspect of Roman Catholicism, which is the kind of the solid, can't get around it, it's a classic kind of identity. But because that theology opens itself out to every human being in the world, and particularly after Vatican II, acknowledges the work of God and the work of the Spirit in other religious traditions, I feel it's imperative for us as a global school to be globally Catholic, small c, as well as Roman Catholic, capital R, capital C. Globally Catholic means that we will not only have a Catholic chapel in the new building, but a room for prayer for people of other traditions that will be fully welcome, as they are on campus more broadly. But we want to emphasize that. We're already working carefully to build up our understanding of Islam. Islam is such an important, really right now seemingly pivotal cultural and religious matrix out of which so many different kinds of results are pouring. We hear about the terrible results, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, etc. But Islam also is remarkably resourceful as a civilizational center and as a partner for us in faith. And we've got to get that right, and we have to do that from a very distinctively Catholic position, but a Catholic position that's always in dialogue and in appreciation, not only of Islam, but of course Judaism, and then the religions of South Asia are becoming more and more important, and both for better and sometimes for worse, as we've seen in the sad persecution of Muslim ethnic minorities, the Rohingya in Myanmar, by a Buddhist population. Sadly, the interesting and complex dynamics of Hinduism and Hindutva, Hindu-ness in India. So that's very much part of the world. It's not a sidebar. That is, engaging religions as advocates for peace and development and making alliances with them. And of course, one of the great advantages is that Pope Francis has entered the world stage in such a way that invites a kind of merciful, compassionate, dialogic engagement with the poor, with the outcast, with the other. And for Catholics, the other is our friend, and the other often is seen in the guise of other religions.
For those of you watching live, we have about 10 minutes left, so if you have any more questions, please submit them now. We have another question coming in from Eric, and he asks, you talked about integrated human development and getting all hands on deck. What are your plans for bridging the gap between the disciplines, specifically engineering, to connect them with the school and its programs, especially with the school's focus on policy?
Thank you, Eric. Everyone who's asking questions, write me and tell me the answers. But I would just say this. Dean Peter Kilpatrick, the Dean of the College of Engineering, is a terrific colleague, and one of the real pleasures of being a new dean of this school is getting to know faculty and leaders in the other colleges, because I'm in the College of Arts and Letters and the Kroc Institute, and you kind of know your own immediate colleagues. But engineering is already fostering, through our initiative for global development, led by VP Bob Bernhard, Associate Provost, and Michael Schweiker, who's running that initiative, working closely with engineering on providing solar panels in Africa, on building bridges and infrastructure in the developing world. Engineering's already involved. There are a number of outstanding engineering faculty, for example, working in Haiti around improving infrastructure when the earthquakes come, as I mentioned before. So one of the challenges, Eric, and others interested in this question, for all of us, is that the provost has asked us to do two things. And he's absolutely correct in both. He says, you will be evaluated as a dean based on how well your unit does. Does it thrive? Does it prosper? Do you reach a, you will be judged as a dean on how well you are a citizen of the university working with the other deans to advance a common vision. That is the goal. And we're blessed at Notre Dame because we have such great leadership and collegial leadership that actually that is an achievable goal. We're all busy building our own units, but we have a good cross-college, cross-unit conversation going, and it's one of the most exciting things emerging at Notre Dame. I've been here 21 years, and I was here as an undergraduate in the 70s. And what's really exciting to see is how all of these colleges, law and engineering and science and arts and letters and architecture, I don't want to leave any of Mendoza, are all asking the question about how does Notre Dame have a better global presence, how do we become more sophisticated in this area, and how do we work together? So long-winded way, Eric, of saying engineering is absolutely vital to hands-on applied improvement, enhancement of people's opportunities for economic growth, for security, and for health care, among many other things. And so we're going to continue to work with engineering on curricular matters, on research, and on partnerships of various kinds. And again, one area you might look at on the website is the Initiative for Global Development, which is one place that's occurring already.
We have another question coming in from Bill, and Bill asks, what new places might we expect as possible destinations for students studying abroad?
New places. Is that Bill?
Bill, yes.
Bill, I don't have an answer for you. I mean, if I start saying names of places a little bit before we're ready to make a commitment, I will get in trouble because I'm not sure where. So let me start this way on the safer ground. I know this. We've already established global gateways, and some of them are new. So Notre Dame will have a presence in China. We're still talking about what kind of presence that will be, how robust, and where in China. But we have not had students go to China and actually have internships and work and learn Asia. I would like us to engage more broadly in Asia. course, one of the third largest Catholic country in the world is the Philippines, and I have spent some time in the Philippines. I've taken about half a dozen trips there, especially to the south in Mindanao. And these are not vacation spots, although there's some beautiful beaches in the Philippines. But we won't be sending students to places that are already doing well. We'll be sending students to places like the Philippines, parts of Africa, parts of China, Latin America, where the question is a question of development. How do we help and work with partners on the ground to bring the best research to bear, the best knowledge that we muster in the academy to bear on questions being faced in places like the Philippines, Uganda, Kenya, South Africa, parts of Europe, Latin America. So I'm not giving you a concrete answer because the truth is I'm not sure yet what our priority internships will be. We're still developing that, but I think you can probably be confident that there will be a mix of places we're already well established, like Jerusalem Tantur Ecumenical Institute in Jerusalem, the London Global Gateway, Rome, but also some new opportunities in Latin America and in Asia and in parts of Africa that we have not sent a great number of Notre Dame students and faculty to before. Those are going to develop, and I'll give you an update when I know more about that.
Great. We're going to take one more question from the audience here. I think it's coming in from Joan. You mentioned that other universities have similar programs of study. What do you hope will distinguish the Keough School from its peers?
The quick phrase is integral human development. Now that's not a phrase that is going to trip off everyone's tongue, so we're going to have to find a way to convey it. But what we're bringing to the conversation and to the curriculum, in addition to all the things the other schools are providing, I mentioned quantitative skills, statistics, budgets, knowing how to write a policy brief, understanding how to be an effective leader, those kind of core skills and aptitudes, as well as regional understanding. We want to bring a deeper regional and cultural understanding so that we are engaged with the peoples, the societies where development will occur, number one. And integral human development means we're going to pay very careful attention to the ethics, the culture, the religious values, and the spiritual dimensions of development and of the partners. And we have to do that in a very solid, responsible way. If we went to our development to Harvard and Tufts and Stanford and other places and say, we're here to talk about spirituality, they would say, that's great, there's where the chapel is off campus or on campus. We're not taking that approach. We're making the argument, which we can do pretty effectively, that these non-technical, as you will, sometimes considered soft historical, cultural, religious parts of the conversation are absolutely essential to success, because the human person is not divided into quadrants, one of which is economic, one of which is technical and scientific, and over here is the religious. It all goes together. So we're going to bring a holistic view, an integral view, and also in doing so try to bring disciplines together that don't always collaborate in conversation. So what are we bringing? Human development that is integrated.
Well, we're all out of time for questions today. Dean Appleby, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks,
I know
Kevin.
we all enjoyed learning about the plannings for the school and look forward to it opening in 2017. So
Great.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I appreciate the time.
And thank you for all of you who watched live and for all the great questions you submitted. Remember, for future online learning events from the Alumni Association and to watch all of our past online events, please visit my.nd.edu/learn. I'm Kevin Brennan with the Notre Dame Alumni Association. Thanks so much for watching.